Millions of tourists are vanishing from Asia's top destinations. Beaches once packed are now deserted. Hotels sit empty, and entire economies that once depended on international visitors are falling apart.
But what happened?
Why is Asia's tourism empire suddenly collapsing? From visa bans and travel warnings to political unrest and climate disasters, these 10 Asian countries are watching their tourism lifelines disappear. And the financial fallout absolutely devastating. Stick around to see which country tops the list, because number one isn't just losing money, it's on the brink of a total tourism meltdown. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more engaging content.
Number 10.
Bhutan, the land of happiness and mountains, once attracted tourists with its unique high-value, low-volume policy. Before the pandemic, tourism contributed over 20% of the country's economy, supporting thousands of livelihoods. But with the onset of COVID-19, Bhutan completely shut its borders, halting all international visits for years. Local tour guides, homestays, and cultural workers lost their only source of income overnight. The famed trekking routes and monasteries became silent and empty, as if frozen in time. Even after reopening, Bhutan imposed high sustainable development fees that deterred budget travelers. The capital Thimphu, once bustling with souvenir shops and festivals, now feels half alive. Many rural families who relied on tourist income migrated to urban centers or abroad for work. Young Bhutanese are turning away from tourism and seeking digital jobs or foreign employment. The tourism infrastructure built over decades is now deteriorating without regular use or investment. Government attempts to shift toward IT and agriculture are ongoing but haven't replaced lost tourism revenue. Bhutan's isolation, once seen as a protective strength, now threatens to leave it behind in the modern economy. If strategic reforms and international support don't arrive soon, Bhutan may never return to its tourism peak.
Number 9.
Sri Lanka, once known for its golden beaches and cultural wonders, relied heavily on tourism for national income. In 2018, the country welcomed over 2 million tourists, boosting local businesses and infrastructure. However, the 2019 Easter bombings severely damaged its global tourism image overnight. As Sri Lanka began recovering, the COVID-19 pandemic delivered a second and more brutal blow. Tourism, which made up about 12% of the GDP, collapsed, pushing the economy toward chaos. In 2022, the country fell into a deep economic crisis, facing fuel shortages and political unrest. With no tourists, the hospitality industry suffered massive layoffs and business closures. Even famous destinations like Sigiriya and Ella now see only a trickle of international visitors. Many locals who once worked as guides or hotel staff are now jobless or have migrated abroad. Hyperinflation and a weak currency further discouraged travelers from visiting the island. Cultural festivals were scaled back or cancelled due to lack of funds and safety concerns. Despite recent efforts to relaunch tourism, international confidence remains critically low. If stability isn't restored soon, Sri Lanka risks losing its place on the global travel map.
Number 8.
The Maldives, a dream destination for luxury seekers, saw over 60% of its GDP depend on tourism. With the pandemic, this tourism-based economy suffered a near-total collapse. Closed airports and halted international flights left island resorts deserted for months. Even after reopening, strict entry rules and reduced global travel slowed the comeback. Resort staff were laid off, and many private islands faced bankruptcy or were sold. Local islands depending on guesthouses saw their economies reduced to survival mode. Rising sea levels added to the crisis, threatening long-term sustainability of these islands. The Maldives' debt rose sharply as the government borrowed to keep essential services running. The tourism tax base shrank, affecting public infrastructure and healthcare in remote areas. Many construction projects meant for tourists were suspended or abandoned completely. Foreign investors began withdrawing interest from the archipelago, fearing instability. Without major reinvestment and climate action, the Maldives faces a twin crisis of economy and environment. What was once paradise now stands at the edge of economic and ecological collapse.
Number 7.
Laos, known for its peaceful landscapes and temples, was a rising backpacker destination in Southeast Asia. Tourism brought in about 15% of its GDP, especially in cities like Luang Prabang and Vang Vieng. The pandemic forced the country to close its borders for nearly 2 years. With international visitors gone, many small businesses dependent on tourism shut permanently. Guesthouses, cafes, and cultural centers now remain closed or operate at minimal capacity. Even after reopening, tourist traffic has not returned to pre-pandemic levels. Laos invested in a new high-speed rail expecting tourism growth, but it hasn't delivered. The country is now weighed down by debt, particularly from Chinese infrastructure loans. Local tour operators are struggling to survive with no clear recovery timeline. Festivals that once attracted global attention are now reduced to local gatherings. Rural communities that benefited from ecotourism are returning to farming and low-wage labor. The tourism sector is still underfunded, and marketing to global travelers is weak. Without global attention and investment, Laos risks being forgotten entirely by international tourism. Number 6. Nepal, home to Mount Everest and rich cultural heritage, depended heavily on tourism for national income. In 2019, the country earned over $800 million from tourists, mainly trekkers and spiritual seekers. The pandemic led to a near halt in climbing expeditions and trekking activities. Thousands of Sherpas, guides, and porters were left jobless with no financial support. Remote mountain lodges and tea houses shut down due to lack of visitors. Many villagers left high-altitude regions to seek labor jobs in the Gulf or India. Nepal's airports and roads began to deteriorate without tourist-funded maintenance. Corruption scandals around tourism relief funds further delayed sector recovery. Even after reopening, international tourist arrivals remain far below expectations. Domestic tourism has increased slightly but cannot replace international revenue. Everest permits were offered at discounts, but interest remains low due to global economic uncertainty. Without serious government reform and infrastructure revival, Nepal's tourism may never recover fully. A nation that once stood tall is now quietly collapsing under economic pressure.
Number 5.
Cambodia, home to the majestic Angkor Wat, relied on tourism for over 30% of its employment. Before 2020, millions of tourists visited its ancient temples and vibrant cities like Phnom Penh. But after COVID-19, tourist arrivals plummeted by more than 90%. Hotels, restaurants, and tuk-tuk drivers lost all income within weeks of the shutdown. Even now, the recovery remains painfully slow with low international visitor numbers. Many cultural events and performances have been cancelled due to lack of funding. Entire neighborhoods in Siem Reap that once thrived on tourism are now ghost towns. The government's attempt at a tourism bubble failed to attract significant interest. Unemployment in the sector remains high, pushing many into unregulated or dangerous jobs. Inflation has made the country less affordable for budget travelers. Infrastructure projects tied to tourism have been delayed or abandoned. Foreign investors have become hesitant due to economic and political instability. Cambodia's tourism dream is now on the verge of fading into history without urgent revival.
Number 4.
Myanmar, a rising star in Southeast Asian tourism, has spiraled into collapse since the 2021 military coup. The nation had been gaining popularity for its temples in Bagan and colonial charm in Yangon. But political unrest and violence led to global travel warnings and flight cancellations. International airlines stopped service, and embassies advised citizens to avoid the country. Tourism revenue dropped by more than 90%, crippling the national economy. Hotels and cultural sites are empty, with many permanently closed or repurposed. Many tourism workers fled or were forced into poverty amid the chaos. Foreign investment in the tourism sector disappeared due to human rights concerns. The military regime's instability has erased years of tourism development progress. Locals now focus on survival rather than hosting foreign guests. Bagan's iconic pagodas, once filled with tourists, now gather only dust and silence. Even regional tourists avoid Myanmar due to safety and ethical concerns. Without peace and democratic reform, Myanmar's tourism future looks grim and uncertain.
Number 3.
Mongolia, known for its vast steppes and nomadic culture, had just begun growing as a tourist hotspot. By 2019, it was attracting adventure travelers and boosting local income through ecotourism. Then came the pandemic, which led to 2 years of complete border closures. Nomadic families who relied on tourist stays lost a vital source of seasonal income. The capital Ulaanbaatar saw mass hotel and tour agency closures during the lockdowns. Newly built tourist infrastructure now lies underused or abandoned. The government shifted focus toward mining and agriculture for economic stability. Attempts to relaunch tourism have faced global competition and low international awareness. Dust storms, harsh winters, and rising desertification have further deterred visitors. Mongolia's national parks now see fewer visitors and reduced conservation funding. Young people are leaving rural areas, reducing local hospitality capacity. Without strong international marketing and partnerships, Mongolia risks being left behind. What was once an emerging gem is now quietly fading into the shadows.
Number 2.
Indonesia, with over 17,000 islands, thrived on tourism, especially in hotspots like Bali and Lombok. In 2019, it welcomed over 16 million international tourists, contributing massively to its GDP. When COVID-19 struck, flights stopped, and tourism came to a grinding halt. Bali's economy, where 70% depends on tourism, collapsed within months. Hotels were boarded up, and locals returned to farming and fishing to survive. Digital nomads tried to help recovery, but numbers weren't enough to sustain the industry. Infrastructure projects stalled due to budget cuts and lack of foreign funds. Tourist scams and rising crime have increased in some areas, damaging the island's image. Environmental damage has gone unchecked without ecotourism programs. Attempts to launch a Bali digital nomad visa have yet to show big results. Some beaches and resorts now remain permanently closed or sold to foreign investors. Indonesia is reopening, but tourism income is still far below pre-pandemic levels. Without major reform, the country risks losing its competitive edge in Asia.
Number 1.
The Philippines, with its over 7,000 islands, was once a tourism haven in Southeast Asia. Places like Boracay, Palawan, and Cebu drew millions of visitors each year. Tourism contributed around 13% to the national GDP and supported millions of jobs. But during the pandemic, international arrivals dropped by over 80%. Many islands became inaccessible, and businesses collapsed within weeks. Resorts were abandoned, flights cancelled, and tour operators shut down. Locals who transitioned from fishing to tourism returned to poverty overnight. Environmental programs funded by tourism revenue were halted or defunded. Natural disasters like typhoons worsened the already fragile infrastructure. Government aid was limited and failed to reach many affected communities. International tourist confidence in safety and accessibility remains low. Even now, visitor numbers remain well below 2019 levels. The country faces a long and uncertain path back to tourism stability. If this video opened your eyes, hit the like button, share it with a fellow traveler, and subscribe for more untold global stories. Drop a comment. Which country do you hope recovers first?